These 5 things I know are true. 1. NXT Takeover still has the magic as an event. 2. Adam Cole breaking up from the Undisputed Era should never be a thing. 3. The Dusty Classic is the best thing in all of tag team wrestling today, period. 4. Pete Dunne and Finn Balor had a true wrestling match last night, and that was a beautiful thing. And 5. Sometimes wrestling is goofy, and sometimes it's bullshit. I'm Nirvana Sparkle. Let's talk about the week that was and some of the week that might be. This is goofy wrestling bullshit for last week and the start of this week. But mostly about NXT Takeover Vengeance Day. Can we please just cut some of these names down and just call it Takeover Vengeance or Takeover Insert Blank? That's my only major complaint about last night, because last night was great wrestling, despite the fact that I do not watch NXT's main wrestling product from week to week. The reason for that being that I don't believe in the Performance Center process, or as I like to call it, the Goldberg Center. Because if you believe the internet wrestling community, at least some of them, every NXTer would have to go on a straight Goldberg run to the World Championship in order to be properly qualified as booked to be believable. First off, booking is about picking the result, not making the story. That's the writer's job. Booking has nothing to do with writing. Do not confuse the two. They put the match on a little easel board, they pick where it's slotted, and ultimately they pick the winner. Storytelling and writing is what you're really complaining about. Booking is a very 50-50 coin flip science. It's basically a decision that has to be made before the event is even taken place. Proper writing leads to proper booking. Improper writing leads to improper booking. It's part of building the proverbial wrestling sandwich. And the main roster doesn't do very well to book the NXT sandwiches well. NXT is the homegrown mini deli. The main roster brands are Subway and Quiznos. But Subway and Quiznos always tries to change the ingredients to an already working recipe. So that's why it constantly fails. And enough of that constant failure can lead a wrestling fan to be demotivated to watch the stuff on the mini deli, which I've become. But that mini deli put on quite the pay-per-view last night. NXT Takeover is the one thing in WWE, without a question, that has always been, and probably always will be as long as NXT exists, consistent. Last night, we had some stars being made, son, from Miguel Gonzalez to Mercedes Martinez, and we got some, and MSK, to some stars being reestablished, like Cameron Grimes in this week's goofy moment of the week. Just watching that video called Money to the Moon? Well, for all my Little Pony fans in the audience, Diamond Tiara, you just found the man of your dreams. His name is Cameron Grimes. Go have a conversation with him. But other than that, it was hilarious. It was JBL by way of Beverly Hillbillies with a little bit of the Shawn Michaels 1995 WWE title spread. It was weird. But the actual wrestling, boy, the wrestling. I am not a fan of who I like to call flippy shit artists like MSK. But when you can execute the flippies that clean, that well, I can get behind that. And I can get behind some good tag team wrestling. And the Dusty Classic is the best tag team wrestling in the WWE that you will see all year without question. And once again, the finals of both the female and the male tournaments delivered, with the right teams winning, with Dakota Kai and Rodriguez winning for the females, while MSK won for the males. Expect MSK to win the NXT titles off of Birch and Larkin, definitely. And they have charisma and vibe. And if they keep executing moves as clean as that, well, they're going to go places. A lot of places. Sadly, because the main roster doesn't value tag team wrestling, though, it's hard to see their ceiling going anywhere past the NXT titles. And that's a real shame, because I would love an MSK Street Profits matchup. Any day of the week, serve me that up. Let these two highly athletic teams be highly athletic all day long. But you see, I'm a stickler for the classics. And boy, did Pete Dunne and Finn Balor deliver the kind of wrestling classic that makes old Nirvana Sparkle smile with endless glee. I loved chain wrestling. I loved submission wrestling. I loved submissions. I loved mat psychology. I loved Mongolian and 9-inch chops. I love back and forth counterplay. That's the kind of wrestling that I enjoy the most and get the most emotionally invested in. And boy, did Pete Dunne and Finn Balor provide me with the juice last night. As an old school 80s wrestling fan that was born in the year of WrestleMania Lord 1984, this goes right up my alley, son. Right up it. Rebook this match 10 million times if you want. This is proper writing wrestling booking. See, proper booking is when you can watch a wrestling match and no matter who they pick as the winner, the company wins. Proper wrestling storytelling and proper wrestling booking is when you can turn the champion losing into a good thing, but also keep the champion winning a good thing. In other words, a no-loss situation. That's what that match was. That's what the MSK versus Grizzled Young Veterans was. No-loss booking. Win-win booking. That's when you know you have a good wrestling show. When you book win-wins instead of things having to go a certain direction to make them win. Because that means a part of your recipe is inevitably flawed and needed to be fixed in the development stage. Great wrestling leads to win-win booking, which means both wrestlers become believable. Every step in the process must work. And the reason why NXT Takeover was a success last night is every frame of the recipes worked. There was no mistakes whatsoever. It was a perfect, especially in the pandemic era, 10 out of 10 show. This is the best show that the WWE has put on since our medical problem began last February, ironically enough. There were stars all night long. And there will be tons of podcasts like Circle of Doom, my friends over at Wrestling Rewind, The Titantron, and others like BC Amplified definitely singing the praises of this night. As well they should. It was the best night of NXT wrestling I've seen in months, ironically, since the last takeover. Now, sadly, NXT Takeover ended with something that I understand had to happen, kind of. But does it really? And that's why I'm going to leave the question to you guys. Help me out with this. Adam Cole turned his back on the Undisputed Era. I am a massive fan of the Undisputed Era, or as I like to call them in my My Little Pony world, the Cutie Mark Crusaders. I love the Undisputed Era. Their evolution with DX Cool. Two things that I can definitely get behind. And that team was seemingly broken up. Now, granted, Adam Cole should be a heel forever. But why can't the Undisputed Era come together as a group? Why can't they dominate the main roster like the Hurt Business has been doing the last couple of weeks? Or Evolution that did their entire run? Or NWO or DX? The Undisputed Era could easily get into the conversation with those groups in terms of cool factor. I mean, the New Day is nice, but the UE has that kind of DX recipe, and they're really letting it down. Now, yes, from an NXT standpoint, this creates not just one storyline, it seemingly creates two that could intersect with each other. Adam Cole rechasing the NXT title that he owned with an iron fist, and Finn Balor and Kyle O'Reilly finally, because of injuries, having their final blow-off match, and Kyle O'Reilly finally becoming a solo star and breaking out of his tag team roots. But also, like other podcasts have mentioned, Karrion Kross might be thrown in this situation. Remember, he was injured. He never technically lost the NXT title. In all fairness, he's the real champion here, which creates an interesting but very usable situation. Other people in the wrestling internet have been saying this should be a WrestleMania booked match in a fatal four-way situation for the NXT title. Normally, I don't agree with the wrestling internet when they say these outlandish superbooks. But in this case, I absolutely would buy that for $1. There are very few times that the internet has nailed a situation to a cross. This is one of them. WWE, Book that match. Make it happen now. Sure, I wasn't thinking about it when I made my fantasy booking videos that you can also find for WrestleMania 37 on this channel for Night 1 and Night 2. I never thought of this match as part of that. And now come to think of it, I'm almost ashamed that the internet beat me to it. It's actually a pretty solid call. I'm not gonna lie to you. But sadly, after a takeover that good, we have to unfortunately get to the 4 out of 10 show that is always Monday Night Raw. See, unlike the internet, I'm never disappointed with Monday Night Raw. I'm never mad at Monday Night Raw. I don't expect more out of Monday Night Raw per week. Because I never expected the brand split era part 2 of the WWE to ever be good. And sure enough, it's followed through with that never goodness. Especially in the COVID era with no fans, Raw has been the brand that has suffered the most, not only statistically through ratings, dropping from a near 2 to a near 1.2, which is terrible, but then again, modern wrestling has played victim to the modern internet. I'm sorry, we have to take some accountability with that. But that being said, tonight is all about lead-in to the Elimination Chamber. You can expect Drew McIntyre to be booked. You can expect all the participants to be involved in a match. I'm willing to make a prediction that tonight's probably going to be a beat the clock sprint for the last spot in the Elimination Chamber or something similar to that vein. They always pull that card around the Elimination Chambers to make the last spots feel important. But the sad thing about the Raw Elimination Chamber is because The Miz is in it, I don't take it that seriously. Because Miz has the ultimate out, the Money in the Bank briefcase. Which means he can circumvent the result here, he can circumvent the result at Fastlane if he wanted to with Roman, or he could circumvent all pretense and circumvent the result at WrestleMania. Having the Money in the Bank briefcase holder constantly in main event feuds does not help build the scary factor of the case. In fact, it diminishes the scary factor of the case. Take Miz out of the match this week. Put, I don't know, Mustafa Ali in it. Yes, Mustafa. Put him in it. He had a chance to be in the Elimination Chamber last year. Injuries prevented him from doing so. This is your chance to right a wrong here. Miz does not need to be in this match. Usually, I don't go with the aggressive super internet opinion. But in this case, Mustafa Ali makes more sense. You don't have to have him win it, though. Money in the Bank works best when it is shown scarcely, when it is shown rarely, when the Money in the Bank owner isn't even on screen, as though to give the idea that the Money in the Bank holder is plotting his final attack to use the case and cash in. It's almost like a supervillain having a trump card. And sadly, over these last few years, they've taken away the trump card ability of the Money in the Bank briefcase. It's starting to fall flat. This all began when Baron Corbin couldn't cash in his Money in the Bank to win, not because of anything booked on kayfabe. No, he didn't get to cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase for a win because of punishment over tweet. Why do things on Twitter end up affecting kayfabe? That has never made any sense to me. But ever since that moment, the Money in the Bank has lost its evil supervillain power and has been otherwise used as a prop to get the wrestler on TV. And that's not what the case was made for. But that's what the case is being used for. And that's sadly a misnomer of its own formula. See, a lot of what's going on with WWE Raw is not because Raw is 3 hours. That is an excuse. That is a symptom, not the reason. The reason that Raw being 3 hours is unbearable is because none of the guys on the Raw side of the roster are over enough casually to make the watching of Raw must see. It's not because of the size of the hours you have, it's the greatness of the roster. I'd be willing to make a case if I were to make Raw 3 hours in the middle of the Attitude Era, this would not have been ever a problem because the roster would have been able to carry those 3 hours because of the compelling television that's created because of the compelling character. Turning Raw back to 2 hours would only be masking how weak the roster is, even and giving them a little bit of protection. Protection they haven't earned nor deserve. Plus, USA likes that added advertising money. So, that sadly is never going to happen. Sadly, Elimination Chamber has lost its importance, and mainly because there's Fastlane right directly after it. Whatever happened to the days of you watch the Royal Rumble and then the long wait begins? 2 months without a single pay-per-view in tow, and then WrestleMania happens, which is 54 days away by the time of this recording, which is today, Monday. Back in the day, WrestleMania used to only be after a long gap of 2 or sometimes 3 months without a pay-per-view, thus building the hype and anticipation and allowing the writers to write out long-term dramatic storytelling to make the WrestleMania payoffs feel fantastic. Under this new format, you can't really do that because you have to reactionary type book for this. That's why WrestleMania feels kind of meh in the modern era. Because the storytelling, the framing, the drama is now completely different. The recipe has been altered when it didn't really need to. But expect all the members of Elimination Chamber to come through with matches tonight. And also expect Matt Riddle, Keith Lee, probably to be forced into a tag team match to take on the Hurt Business by way of preparing for that triple threat match that's going to be at the Chamber event this Sunday. So, that's my Raw predictions and preview there. But let's get to my favorite segment, the Throne Room segment for this week. And unlike the last 2 weeks where I've bagged on the NXT formula and bagged on it being an utter disaster, no, I'm going to get off of NXT and stop joint manipulating it like Pete Dunne, and instead talk about the Forbidden Door. What is the Forbidden Door, you might ask? Well, the Forbidden Door is what AEW has opened alongside with New Japan. This is the first time on this show that AEW is being talked about in any sense of the word. But I'm going to leave it to you. If you want AEW discussed more on this show, I can definitely put the work in, even though I don't prefer AEW's brand of 1996 by way of 2002 type combat, but I do what you want. So let me know. They have signed a temporary partnership deal with both Impact Wrestling, the former TNA, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, the oldest and most well-known wrestling organization in the world. Now, normally, you would think a partnership like this would be a wrestling fan's dream, and on the surface, it totally is. Except there's one small problem. The spark that is causing the Forbidden Door to be opened is way too young to be opening the Forbidden Door. You see, AEW is not 2 years old yet. Its audience consists of Attitude Era loving loyalists that are sick and tired of the WWE product that feel that they've been victimized by the WWE product and decide that it's a good alternative. However, it is because of this youth that they're able to make brash decisions such as this one. To me, the partnerships that are happening in AEW don't speak of innovation or chance taking or doing something that the WWE wouldn't do. It speaks of desperation as they're trying to keep NXT off their backs and trying to build a more casual audience. This would be logical, except for this. Impact Wrestling has no credibility whatsoever because of Dixie Carter leaving it in shambles year in and year out and it being constantly up on the block for being bought. Impact Wrestling's credibility is at an all-time low. In fact, AEW has done more by adding them to this partnership for Impact Wrestling to even be talked about. And the worst yet is not translating into Impact's ratings. The ratings haven't largely increased since the partnership began. As far as New Japan goes, New Japan doesn't really need a partnership like this. What they need is a consistent United States cable channel to provide their content in proper translation that's not on the back end of the dial like Access TV, but rather somewhere on the front ends of the dial like a Paramount network or even, Lord knowing, TNT itself. New Japan deserves its own show in its own space to get people used to New Japan's slower, more plot-driven, more soap opera style of wrestling. Being affiliated with AEW doesn't really help translate the New Japan style over to the casual fan. So, it won't have as much impact as the internet might make you think it might. And with New Japan having more credibility than Impact, all three partners look like they're not really helping each other, but rather hurting each other. AEW is the hottest brand in wrestling. Them trying and wasting their time to lift up Impact especially makes no sense to me. Them working with New Japan, however, I can get that. They need international love. But as far as this partnership goes, AEW is not the company that can create the massive nuclear bomb that this idea is supposed to be setting. But let's say in a far-flung WWE future, Triple H or somebody of younger repute were to do this with a casual WWE audience, and WWE is not only global, but more casual and ingrown reach. If they were to open up the forbidden door, then you would have a nuclear explosion. Why? WWE, to many people growing up, has been synonymous with pro wrestling. They are. They are the very nature of professional wrestling, sports entertainment, whatever you wish to prefer it. They are the heart and soul. They are the alpha and omega, unfortunately, for most. The beginning and the end. If they were to open the forbidden door and do something like this, then the nuclear explosion would then so happen. It's only because of Bruce Pritchard and the Boys Club, led by Vince, that you would never see a trigger like this pulled now. But if, in the near future, WWE sees what's happening here and decides, with new leadership of course, to finally pull the trigger on this, then, and only then, would you get the nuclear explosion that AEW is hoping for. AEW is just too young to be trying something like this. Yes, it's an innovative idea. Yes, it's the ultimate risk. It's the ultimate gamble. AEW has prided themselves on basing some of their matches and their events on casino events. But this is one time that, in my opinion, they're going to come up to the casino and they're going to come up naked, without money. Sure, it will solidify their hardcore wrestling base, their base that is already buying in to what they do. That will further solidify it. If they're looking to glue people to TNT that have already made the decision by absolute metrics, they're going to succeed by leaps and bounds. But to bring in the casual non-wrestling fan into a company they know nothing about, with a history that is barely old enough to start crawling on diapers, opening up the forbidden door, reeks of desperation, trying to grow an audience that they're seeing by their own ratings is starting, like Eric Bischoff said this last week, to stagnate. AEW shouldn't be trying to be desperately bringing more people in. They should be trying to expand their TV presence. In other words, what they need is a second or third TV show. They need to end up on ESPN. They need to start actually playing from the WWE's marketing book. Opening the forbidden door won't work because you can't market that to people that just don't know why it's so important. But then again, people don't know why you're important, except for the notion that you're not the other guys. Hopefully that opinion inspired you. So that's the end of Goopy Wrestling Bullshit for this week. Tell me down in the comment section below about any of the segments and how you felt about NXT Takeover Raw this week once we're out of it, or what I said in the throne room this week. And also, feel free to drop me a line not only on YouTube but on Twitter at @NirvanaSparkle with any ideas that you would like me to talk about in any subjects. Shout outs once again go to my other subscriber, the Titantron podcast, for using my question that I supplied to him on Twitter, not only for him giving me a pseudo answer, but for the motivation to make a future episode of his show about it. And I would be glad to answer the question back, Titantron, once we get to that point. Secondly, Wrestle Game Rewind on the Rewind Wrestling Network will continue on, hopefully at some point this week, and make sure to check that out there. They need the support, and especially the Game Rewind, because we can't break the 20 view ceiling. So I'm asking for a little bit of help in that degree. Outside of that, you can experience the next Goofy Wrestling bullshit next Monday as well, as I talk about Elimination Chamber, and we try to guess Edge's decision going into WrestleMania. That and so much more. Until next week, I'm Nirvana Sparkle. Find peace in your own Nirvana, and I'll see you here talking some more goofy wrestling bullshit next week.